Welcome to the Surviving BPD Relationship Breakup Podcast. If someone in your life has BPD, you know how difficult it can be, and you need to learn how to heal from those toxic relationships. And that's where this show comes in. Expert education, expert knowledge, expert insight, and delivered with compassion and empathy. With your host, counselor and trauma recovery coach, AJ Mahari. To purchase and book sessions with AJ, go to ajmahari.ca. Now your host, AJ Mahari.
A couple things before we start this episode. I have a website for this podcast, and it's at survivingbpdrelationshipbreakup.com. Interactive website. It's a website is its own feed for the podcast and also for my YouTube channel. So if you'd like to get a lot of the videos that aren't in this podcast, you'd like to check those out, you can do that at survivingbpdrelationshipbreakup.com. I would just like to encourage you to please leave a 5-star rating for this podcast if you find it helpful, to help this podcast keep growing and keep reaching more and more people who could benefit from this content. I get a lot of people with BPD rating it at 1 star because, they have all these problems with what I'm saying, and they think it's horrible and disgusting and all that kind of BPD kind of stuff. This podcast website is survivingbpdrelationshipbreakup.com. And now, let's dive into today's episode. In this episode of the podcast, I'm going to take a deep and gentle look at one of the most confusing and painful experiences in the end for partners or ex-partners of someone with untreated borderline personality disorder. Misunderstanding BPD intensity as love. Why it feels like love, but it certainly isn't love. So the way intense, overwhelming BPD behavior in the early stages of trying to build a connection, why do they get misunderstood as love in that idealization phase? So many people who have lived through a relationship with someone with BPD say the same thing. I've never felt anything like it. The closeness was immediate. The emotional bonding felt electric. The conversations lasted all night. Conversations were almost daily in many people's cases and for big parts of the day or the night. Many people also say that when they first met the person with BPD and didn't know that, often a client will say to me something like this, quote, "I thought I had met the man or woman of my life," unquote. Or people say, "I thought this was my soulmate. This was the man or woman I've been waiting for all my life." And then so painfully and tragically, it turns out that's not really the case. The declarations came quickly and with a kind of urgency from the person with BPD that felt like destiny rather than danger for the person with codependency. And if you've ever been the steady one, if you're the codependent, the caretaker, the loved one, the one who feels responsible for others, that intensity can feel like finally being chosen, finally being needed, finally being central in someone's world. And then you feel seen and heard when you're not really being seen and heard. Or at least more often you're not than you are to some degree or other. But what you were experiencing wasn't love. It was emotional survival on the part of people or the person with borderline personality disorder. When a person with untreated BPD meets someone who feels safe, they latch on to that pseudo-connection with a kind of desperation that comes from early attachment wounds. And again, most people with BPD have disorganized attachment, which really means they don't have a style of attachment. They don't know how to attach. In that moment, or in those moments, or however long the idealization phase lasts, which varies greatly between people with BPD because they're all individuals and not all the same. So in those moments, in that idealization phase, you and the person with BPD are not creating a mature adult bond. People with BPD are in a childlike emotional state, trying to secure an attachment that once felt impossible, and that tragically is impossible until and unless they get really significantly treated. The intensity that you feel or felt pouring toward you is the intensity of a person with borderline personality disorders: fear, longing, ache, and dependency. Their neediness. They're coming from a childlike place inside an adult's body. It's not the steady warmth of emotional intimacy that you might have thought it was, might have really felt like that, or that you might still be hoping it could be again, could be again as if it ever was, right? Because the feelings are so big, because the person is so expressive, the untreated borderline, because the energy is so consuming, whether it's the idealization or it becomes later after the major split to devaluation, the energy is so consuming. But in the beginning, it looks and feels like love. It's fast, it's dramatic, it's intoxicating. It mimics what movies and romance stories teach us wrongly to associate with passion, the chase, the obsession, the all-or-nothing declarations, the smacking together, the spending all kinds of time talking. It's like a magical sort of like insta relationship, only it's really an insta trauma bond. But healthy love doesn't come rushing in like a tidal wave. Healthy love unfolds slowly. It's built, not proclaimed, and it's built through acts of love and mutuality and reciprocity and real communication, not just words. Real love deepens as two people show each other who they truly are over time. Borderline intensity is often mistaken for love because it's emotionally loud. Like I said, it's all-consuming. Someone with BPD can make you feel like the center of their universe one moment, and if you grew up being the emotional caretaker or had many of the various issues that people do in childhood that creates codependency, this can activate this seeming connection with the intensity of the borderline in the beginning, can activate for you some of your deepest longings as well. And not all of those deep longings for people with codependency are in your conscious awareness. You're not just meeting a person, you're meeting a story you've carried inside yourself since childhood. A story that says, quote, "If someone needs me this much, maybe I finally matter," unquote. But what feels like the person with BPD is treasuring you is often being used as an emotional anchor by the person with BPD. You are seen, experienced unconsciously as an emotional anchor and or object to other representation of a really great parent never had. Your image is pristine to the untreated borderline. Your image is that of the perfect parent they never had that they so long for. And even in idealization, they're not really experiencing, seeing, or hearing you for who you really are. What feels like BPD devotion is actually their fear of abandonment. It's the approach avoidance conflict at the center of everything to do with borderline personality disorder. It's they can't get close enough to you fast enough because of the fear of abandonment. And then at some point, or maybe many points, maybe like in cyclical ways, then they can't get far enough away from you in devaluation because now they have engulfment fear. And when they fear engulfment, or they have engulfment fear, they believe that all the emotional dysregulation and triggers they're experiencing are caused by you, and they're not, but they believe they're caused by you because they don't understand why they're feeling all that they're feeling. They don't have any conscious awareness, if they're untreated, about the approach avoidance conflict. What feels like intimacy is emotional fusion. It's enmeshment. It's the beginning of a fantasy bond that will widen and deepen into a trauma bond that many, probably everybody who's ever been with somebody with BPD believes, at least for some period of time, that this is really actually incredible love. And it's a tragedy that it isn't. What feels like vulnerability is often the emotional dysregulation of the person with BPD. And the tragedy is that the person with BPD genuinely believes in these moments or phases or beginnings of, quote, relationships, unquote, that their idealization, these moments, that what they feel is real love. They really do believe that. They just don't understand. And a lot of what's happening for them are unconscious repetition compulsion cycles where they are trying, without a self, to find a loving parent that they may well not have had. And I just need to say, it's not all people with BPD that have cluster B parents or very wounding, traumatizing parents. About 13% don't have that. But then the best we know about that is that it's perceived abandonment versus actual abandonment that is a big part of creating borderline personality disorder in people who don't have those rather more typical 87% or so parents or family environment, dysfunctional family environments that really are needed, whether BPD has some genetic component, some heritability, but people out there are saying all these different percentages as if they know and they don't know. The quote, science, end quote, hasn't got proof of this, but whether BPD is heritable, inherited or not, well, the real truth about that is it needs an invalidating environment to kick it off, and it can still be healed. But so many of you are with or have been with somebody with BPD who's untreated and thinking there's nothing wrong with them, everything was your fault, which it wasn't, but that's what they misperceive. And so they aren't lying in that idealization beginning. They aren't faking it. They're overwhelmed. They're clinging to you to soothe an internal storm they've been fighting alone their entire life. An internal storm that requires 8 to 16 years worth of treatment to quiet and to calm, and for the person with BPD to find themselves, to undo all of those defense mechanisms, and to perhaps then have a chance at healthy love and relationship. But people with BPD, and especially untreated, their feelings aren't stable. They can't hold a consistent picture of you. They do not have object constancy. And they don't really know themselves, and so they don't really know the difference in a conscious, emotionally mature way at all of where they end and you begin. They idealize you when you soothe them and devalue you when you fail to regulate their emotions. You become split between sort of that perfect object other good parent never had in idealization and dangerous and the bad guy or bad person when you can't be perfect, and then they start to be triggered, not by you, but by their internal triggers from childhood. And neither category represents who you actually are at all, or what you've done or what you didn't do, or you think you could have, if you just did this, or if you just didn't do that. People torture themselves with that because as you learn more about borderline personality disorder, then you think, well, now I really know it. And a lot of you know it well, but you still don't know it to the core. Because I have clients endlessly that in their belief that they understand, there's still so much more they need to learn. And even as much as you can understand and learn, and if you become some quasi-expert in BPD, because it's something you experienced, because it has so traumatized you, it's really, really difficult to make all of that make sense regardless. And so this is how misunderstanding happens. Everything about what's true about people with BPD and especially untreated, and the reality that most people don't realize they have codependency, and most people don't know what BPD is. So it just feels like this is the best experience of my life in the idealization, in the meeting the person, in the whirlwind of it all, where people spend so much time or all their time together, or they might work together, they take trips together, they do all kinds of things, and it's really all so too good to be true. You think the early idealization was love, but on the part of the borderline, it was projection. And like I said, it's object-other relating. It's not about you. You're not seen. You're not heard. You didn't finally get found by someone like you've longed for with codependency, maybe not knowingly or consciously all your life, but since something went wrong in your family of origin, in your childhood. And that doesn't always mean that you have bad parents or terrible parents for people with codependency. It just means that, often children get hurt by various different things in childhood, then go on to, as you get older, you go on to minimize that and push it away. But there's nothing like the enticing borderline idealization experienced as so much incredible love and etc. to then have people experience that and think it is love, misunderstanding that. And then when the devaluation comes, the split to devaluation, they ghost you, they discard you, or you break up because you can't stand it anymore. However these relationships end, then you really get into rumination and cognitive dissonance and all kinds of things, because now you're trying to figure out, well, but that closeness was such a connection. What happened? How could they just ghost me? How could they just yell and scream at me or say nothing, but just leave and tell me that, I'm the bad one, meaning you, and that, you did it all and they're just gone. How does that happen? I mean, I get asked that question by clients, even a client I've worked with over a long time, like each client. It just is really, really hard to not necessarily reconcile, but to work your way out of the fantasy and the trauma bond. But in the beginning, everything that felt so amazing and felt so like the person with BPD that you may not have even known what BPD was, it felt so much like they loved you, and you finally arrived to the person that you thought was going to be the person for your life, and the only true connection was the fantasy bond and the trauma bond, not healthy love. You think the breakup was your fault, but it was their internal world collapsing. It's not about you. It's not about what you did or didn't do. It's not about what you said or didn't say. Misunderstanding BPD love keeps people stuck in very painful rumination, cognitive dissonance, wanting the person back, often chasing the person, or the person with BPD that discards you or ghosts you comes back, and you welcome them back because that intermittent reinforcement. And make no mistake about it, these trauma bonds, you are addicted to the trauma bond of the cycle that starts repeating when people continue to work so hard to try to recycle these relationships, when really what's in your best interest is to let it rupture and let it go, and then get into therapy and treatment and work through it. And it's extremely painful. And people have all kinds of difficulty coping with being ghosted or discarded or having to leave the person with BPD, because what still stays primary in your mind, with all the pain, with all the difficulties, all the devaluations, maybe all the silent treatment, all the rage, is the beginning that was so good that you want that back. But you're in love with a person who has potential to be sort of like maybe the person in idealization seemed, but who doesn't know who they are and isn't a whole put together person at all. And so this whole situation, this whole tragedy of these relationships, the fantasy bonds, the betrayal bonds that fit into the bigger trauma bonds, it keeps you ruminating, replaying every moment of the early intensity, of the idealization, of the best of everything you probably have ever experienced, is how it's described to me very often by clients. Trying to find the part where it turned into chaos, because you just want to figure that part out so you can make it all magically wonderful, like in the beginning again. only that's not even possible. But people hope, people try, people feel so desperate to get back to that beginning of that intensity, of that idealization with the borderline, but it really isn't doable. And for people that recycle these relationships, they find that out over and over the hard way, but then they're addicted to getting back to the intermittent reinforcement, which sometimes you don't even really get, or sometimes it lasts just minutes, or maybe a day or a week or something, and then all the devaluation comes back and all the painful cycles and aspects, and the relationship will rupture again. And so people really need to go no contact, to get out of these relationships and get into getting help. And I'm out here to work with you and help you heal if you resonate with me. And in all this chaos and intensity, after a devaluation, a split, a rupture, they're gone, you blame yourself. And it has nothing to do with you. And it's so tragically painful for people who have codependency but who've been with a borderline, because they keep telling you it's all your fault and you believe them. And you think you believe them because, maybe many reasons, but one reason is because you think if you just could figure this out better, try harder, do something different, or do something you didn't do, that you can get back there to that idealization and make this relationship work. And that is the fantasy bond. And it's incredibly painful. And all this experience as you're going through it and you don't know what to do and you don't know how to cope and you're ripped apart and you probably feel like you've lost yourself or you have lost yourself, it keeps you wondering where the, quote, real, unquote, version of the beginning of the, like, of this person and of the relationship, where did they go? Where did that fantastic relationship go? It keeps you trying to rescue the person who first arrived in your life with that hypnotic emotional pull that created the fantasy bond. And now you're stuck in the fantasy bond, as well as maybe a betrayal bond and a trauma bond. But the truth is that the early version of idealization wasn't sustainable because it wasn't really real, not in the way that you thought it was. And I explain this to clients, and I might have something coming soon, like a few modules, a few things that you can not have to pay too much for to learn way more about the depth of what BPD is and how these dynamics play out and what it means for you. Because in the beginning, like, it wasn't sustainable, right? The idealization, that version, because it wasn't rooted in emotional reality in the first place. It was an expression of the person with BPD's pain and need. It wasn't for them about partnership. And to a degree, not the same as those with BPD, it's an expression and a response from the codependent of wanting it to be the most, best and the partnership that you always dreamed of. But it too is an expression, the way that you get so enmeshed, ensconced, and lost in a fantasy bond when the person with BPD is so intense. They're so intense, and it seems like incredible love. When it was an expression of their pain and need, it was also you responding out of your own codependent pain and need. And I'm not suggesting that borderline pain and need is exactly the same as codependent pain and need at all. Real love isn't frantic. Real love isn't desperate. Real love isn't idealization and amazing intensity that then disappears. Real love doesn't swing between idealization and devaluation. Real love doesn't swing between I'll love you now so much and the next day or the next week, this, that, and the other, and I never want to see you again, I never want to talk to you again. 1 minute they're talking marriage, getting a house, maybe you got in a relationship, maybe you got married, maybe you got a house, maybe you had children, and that's what they want until they don't want it anymore. And then what happens? Real love doesn't make you feel like you're both everything and nothing from one day to the next to the person with BPD. Real love is steady. It is earned. It is repaired after conflict, not shattered by it like, quote, borderline love, unquote. Real love grows through truth. But love, and especially with the borderline, but love cannot grow through fantasy. When you finally understand that borderline intensity was not love, you begin to have the opportunity and to see the way forward to get help, to reclaim your own emotional clarity, to find yourself again, and to know yourself even better than you did before this relationship, because people need to not only break the trauma bond with a BPDX, but you also need to heal your codependency, to know more about who you really are in totality. So many people feel that what they responded to was definitely love and passion. It's so tragic, difficult, and heart-wrenching to realize that it was really BPD emotional dysregulation. And then you have to come to see that what you believed was intimacy and so much love was actually a trauma bond built on unmet childhood needs. And those unmet childhood needs are not just the unmet childhood needs of the borderline. They're also the unmet needs, childhood needs of the person with codependency. And so this is how the trauma bond is formed. The trauma bond in the dynamics between a borderline and a codependent is a two-way thing. It's not just the borderline brings the trauma bond. No, people with codependency also bring a trauma bond. And many, many, many of you, maybe even now, you might be like, what? Like, my childhood was fine. I don't know what you're talking about. But think about it. And for those that want to work with me, who resonate with me, I can really help you learn more about how to understand what that really is, how to unpack that, how to understand it, and how to have it help you in your healing from the trauma bond and your healing from codependency. And so because you have your own unmet childhood needs as well, which people are not always consciously aware of, you begin to soften. In therapy, you can begin to soften towards yourself, stop judging yourself, and stop replaying out the interjected negative core beliefs that you were taught in your childhood in one way or another by one parent or both parents. And in this therapy, in this healing and recovery process from BPD relationship, you begin to forgive yourself for not knowing in the beginning. You begin to turn inward and reconnect with the quiet truth that you deserve a love that is calm, mutual, and grounded. But first, people with codependency need to learn how to love themselves and how to heal the wounds of childhood that created the trauma response that codependency really is. So I'm out here to work with anyone who wants to take this journey and do this healing and recovery work if you resonate with me. So as this episode concludes, breathe into the understanding that you didn't imagine what you felt. You didn't exaggerate the connection. You didn't misread the intensity. You interpreted it through hope and from your own unmet childhood needs unconsciously, and not through a clinical lens. And that is human. You likely had no idea that borderline personality disorder existed, let alone what it is and what you were going through. May this awareness bring you back to yourself in part, and therapy will help you to do that fully. May it give you permission to choose the process of getting into therapy to heal. And again, as I said, I'm out here to work with and help people heal if and when if you resonate with me. So the healing journey can help you release the confusion and help you step into, and more so than you even knew before the person with BPD came along, you can step into more of who you really are, more of your own truth, and healing codependency helps break the trauma bond of the BPD relationship, and it will help you to have and to know how to create boundaries, do so much healing, not care what other people think, and to stop putting others' feelings ahead of your own precious feelings. A lot of what people with codependency have to do after these BPD relationship breakups in their healing and recovery is learn how to love yourself, learn how to validate yourself, learn how to be an individuated, more healthy and mature adult so that you don't need what are those unmet needs of childhood anymore, because they will be discovered in the process of healing, healed through inner child healing work, and then you will find your life is very different and so much freer. And what goes along with this, so many things, but you won't put other people's feelings first, and you won't need their validation and approval to feel okay or to feel seen or heard. And the other thing, too, is you will be a happier, healthier person inside yourself, with yourself. And a big part of this healing and recovery is first learning how to find yourself again, and more fully, how to be on your own, not how to rush back into dating and going around circles anymore. So I hope that was helpful as always. And as always, please, as you're going through wherever you're at right now, whatever you're going through, as you're seeking information, beware of all the information out there that isn't accurate, that might help you somewhat, pieces of it. But as so many people come into me that, I've been doing this work for 35 years with people, that as people come, many people know a lot about BPD now. They've listened to all kinds of stuff. That's great. But many people have a lot of misinformation also. And the other thing is, I really help my clients to truly understand BPD in a way that only someone like myself, who knows it inside out, but recovered almost 40 years ago, can really explain it to people and can really answer every single last question you could throw at me in a session about the person that you experienced, that you were hurt by and traumatized by, who has borderline personality disorder. Because it's not so helpful online, though people relate to what other people say, and on the on the Quoras and the Reddits and maybe like comments on YouTube. But not everybody's with the petulant borderline. Not everybody's with a a quiet borderline, and not everybody with BPD is the same, and they're all in the same places. They don't manifest everything the same. Some have relationships that last longer, even though they're up and down and there's lots of problems, and some can't do that at all. And so there's so much more to understand, and I just will quickly end with, and I have clients that ask so many questions, and they're great questions, and as they've developed some understanding to some degree, or lots of understanding about BPD, there can still be misnomers, misunderstandings from not the best information out there, that maybe you picked up some of it, but doesn't all make sense. And again, what I offer in one-to-one sessions, along with all that I've kind of talked about here, what people need to do, heal the codependency, to break the trauma bond, work through the fantasy bond, and any betrayal bonds as well. So much about finding out who you really are and learning why you didn't know that in the first place, but in a loving way, in a self-loving way, and how to refocus, reframe, actually, all the negative core beliefs that you've learned in childhood that you're not aware of, maybe right now yet, and all the negative core beliefs that the trauma on top of your childhood woundedness, the borderline laid on top of that, and has left you with many other negative core beliefs, or negative core beliefs that were triggered from your childhood, but maybe not, this is not in your conscious awareness yet. The number one thing that you categorically need to know and understand at some point, work your way toward that, again, out here to work with you and help you if you resonate with me, is that these relationships have to end. When the person with BPD, with the approach avoidance conflict, in the beginning it's all about approach. And it's all about, I need you, I want you, but not you, but like who you represent to them. And they don't understand this part, and you don't get this in the beginning at all because you don't know. Most people have never heard of BPD until all of a sudden they're starting to realize, oh, I think I'm with somebody with BPD. What does that mean? And some people go, oh, good, there's a name for it, and there's something we can do about this. And then people realize, oh, or like probably not, or hopefully you will realize that, because the more you ruminate, the more you recycle relationship, if that's what's happened for you, or you want that still, you just strengthen the trauma bond, the fantasy bond, and the betrayal bond. And you can't help yourself in that recycling of those aspects of the trauma bond. It just makes the trauma bond stronger. It makes your pain stronger. And it's a place where so many people get so stuck. Sometimes months after relationship, sometimes in on and off relating, and all that sort of cyclical stuff that happens for people, sometimes for a lot of years, sometimes not for a lot of time. But either way, it's so much more damaging to you because people untreated with BPD do not have the capacity to attach or to love in any healthy, consistent, age-appropriate, or congruent way. So I'm not trying to say, oh, people with BPD are just horrible and they are, forget it. I'm saying forget it in a way, but people with BPD are very traumatized individuals. They have been suffered through an emotional arrest in their development. They are young children in adult bodies until and unless they seek all of the treatment and take all of the time that it takes, 8 to 16 years, usually more like, 12 to 16 years to actually be able to heal and recover. But if they do that, if they can do that, if they can find the right therapist, find the right expert, find the right modality, which isn't DBT therapy for recovery, by the way, all of that is so predicated on, can they really commit to it? Can they really stick with it when it gets really, really difficult? Because it does. And it is like, I know personally it's one of the most difficult things anybody can ever set out to do. And the only way that you can heal and recover from BPD is that you want that more than you want anything else in your life. And many people with BPD just aren't there. And when you're thinking, well, maybe if I just get them into DBT therapy and it'll work, no, it doesn't. And also, I just want to add in here at the end that couples therapy with people with BPD does not work either. And I've had countless clients over the years tell me, because they know now, but they didn't know then, they'll go, and I wasted so much time, effort, blood, sweat, tears, heartbreaking, gut-wrenching time and money trying to do joint therapy with the person that they were in a relationship with who has borderline personality disorder. It's time for you to realize one thing, if nothing else. You need to rescue you. You can't rescue a borderline. You need to change you. You can't change a borderline. You need to kind of, quote, fix, unquote, you. You can't fix anybody else. You have unmet childhood needs and a wounded inner child who's leading you around by the nose unconsciously. And then there's the adult part in your conscious awareness of why you so need and want and feel like you have to get this borderline back when truthfully you don't even know who they are. And unfortunately, people with BPD don't realize often the impact of their behavior and their emotional dysregulation and everything they're going through and doing, not always on purpose. They don't realize the impact on other people. And sometimes a lot of people with codependency have been so impacted and traumatized, you're also setting aside the impact of what is borderline abuse, whether they do it on purpose, they intend it, or they have no clue. And it's somewhere in your childhood you learned, because you developed the trauma adaptation of codependency, because you learned that somehow love fighting for love makes sense, which it doesn't, because that's not healthy love. You also probably learned in your childhood that love and abuse go hand in hand, and they don't. And let me just say again, for those who've listened to me a lot, or for the first time, if you're listening for the first time, that where there is abuse, where there is trauma, where there is so much pain, there is no healthy love. Borderline intensity in the beginning, borderline idealization, borderline's launching at you because you are so amazing. They think you're perfect unconsciously, not really consciously. And they see you as a parent figure. Again, usually unconsciously, not consciously. It is the beginning of a disaster for the borderline over and over, and for anyone who gets involved with somebody with BPD. And most of you have codependency. To varying degrees, it's not all the same. So if you heard nothing else, and if you hung into the end here, please know these relationships don't work out. You need to take care of yourself, and the person with BPD needs to go get their own therapy and take care of themselves, or learn how to do that, learn how to find themselves and soothe themselves. And you need to reclaim yourself, and you need to do so much healing that for so many, after BPD ghosting, discard, or many of those, and a breakup, however it happens, it feels impossible. And more people over the years that I've worked with, after BPD relationship breakups, ghosting, discards, are not even wanting to live anymore, very dysfunctional, can't stop ruminating long enough to focus on anything, lose jobs, struggle with other relationships in their lives. Nobody understands. People need to talk about this. People need to repeat themselves a lot about what they've gone through. People need to ask questions and seek understanding and process and process. And no matter how much people in your life love you, they will be worn out the more because you have to talk about this over and over and over again with them. And that's no judgment, right? And people are trying to support you. But that's why I'm just going to say one more time, if you resonate with me, I'm out here to work with you. And maybe that would be a great choice for you, because unlike your loved ones or friends who really won't understand, I mean, usually most of them don't, and they get worn out by how much you need to talk about it as you're trying to process and learn. Well, I have endless patience, endless empathy, a lot of knowledge to help you with and to help you heal. And sometimes clients say to me, often clients say to me, after so many sessions or whatever the case, oh, I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself, I'm sorry. And my response is always, that's absolutely fine. That's necessary. That's part of the process. And so unlike your loved ones, and unlike just people you might know in your life who are great people and they really love you and care about you, I can help you because, well, I'm a professional doing this, but also I totally understand. I've also been the ex of a borderline, the ex of a BPD, NPD. I've been where you are. I've been in your shoes as well. And I understand the need to talk, to ask questions, that somewhat is circular, but that's okay because it's part of the process of trying and working through to not only heal your codependency, do the inner child healing work, etc., but to break the trauma bond, the fantasy bond, the betrayal bond with the borderline. It's not like you're going to say it once to somebody and all of a sudden it's better. So I think I said this earlier, went on a little bit longer. But as always, I hope this is helpful. I hope you know that the only way for you to go from where you are right now, whether that's still in the relationship, still fighting for the relationship, recycling the relationship, or just you've been ghosted, discarded, maybe not your choice, and they will not answer you, and you can't get their attention, and you feel like you're dying inside, and many people feel like they just want to die because it's way too painful. It's so painful, but it's not too painful. Reach out for help and you will be able to get through this. And it takes people different amounts of time, Not everybody who's been traumatized by a person with BPD is the same either. But if you just know this, if you don't take action, and I mean, I'm out here to work with you if I resonate with you. That doesn't mean everybody's going to come to work with me. That's fine. But be careful who you choose and make sure you take an action step to get into therapy and not with the coachies, who are going to help you get your ex back and all that nonsense. They're just setting you up. They're just going to, they're going to re-traumatize you, and you're going to be re-traumatized if you get that person with BPD back. So it's incredibly painful. And so much of what people go through, not just after these breakups, discards, and ghostings, but sometimes years later. People are still ruminating 2, 3, 5+ years later. It is agony, and you absolutely don't want to stay stuck there. So you need to choose to take an action, even if you haven't given up hope yet that you're still going to get them back or it's going to work out. You need to get into therapy to help you to start to heal and not just be all focused on the borderline. And you can't blame the borderline for everything, though they do a ton of things to people. They impact people so negatively, often knowingly, often not knowingly at all. And you are traumatized, but you need to take action. Otherwise, you will end up either still trying to seek out that borderline, getting re-hurt, chasing intermittent reinforcement, which can become an addiction, getting re-hurt, traumatize more, increasing the strength of the trauma bonds hold over you that causes you to to chase the borderline or let them come back or be in those cycles or just be feeling like you don't even want to be here anymore because what happened? What did I do? You didn't do anything. But how could they do this to you? And it takes a lot of work to get through all this, but it is so worth it. So please, if you're ruminating, you're in agony, and you don't know what to do, please, instead of chasing that borderline or reverse hoovering or accepting their hoovers or staying in contact, please take the action step to get into therapy to help somebody, so someone like myself, if I resonate with you, can help you to help you. Because this pain and this trauma is wreaking havoc with your nervous system and not only your emotional health, but your physical health, can be your spiritual health, and can also be, obviously, big-time financial loss as well. So as always, I've said this 3 times, sorry for the repeat. I hope this was helpful. It might not be what you want to hear. You might get really angry at me right now. Some people do. But they still book sessions and they tell me about that first. And that, hey, anywhere that you need to start is a place to start. That's my belief when working with people who become clients of mine. So anyway, I hope it was helpful. And as always, please take action to help yourself to get on the path to start to feel better. And take care.
You've been listening to the Surviving BPD Relationship Breakup Podcast with your host, counselor and trauma recovery coach, AJ Mahari. For more or get sessions with AJ, go to ajmahari.ca. See you next time.